All right. Hey, well, good morning, wildlife. How you guys doing? All right. You guys are more awake than Saturday night was last night, so good job, guys. Hey, well, if we haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Johnny, and I'm on staff here in Wildlife. If it's your first time joining us, big special welcome to you. We are so excited that you guys are here this morning. And before we jump in, I want to ask a question. We had some debate last night in Wildlife Saturday night. We had a family time question, and I would love to hear your response. Here is the question. What is the worst vegetable of all time? Um, some people were confused, like what's a vegetable, what's a fruit? I still don't know. And so anyway, so what's your least favorite vegetable and why? Let's go in the back in the green shirt. Tell everyone your name loud and proud. Jack, everyone, let's give it up for Jack. Round of applause for Jack. That was weak. Yeah, thank you, Alyssa. All right, Jack, what's your least favorite vegetable? Brussels sprouts. Have you ever had them do you eat just raw Brussels sprouts or do you cook them? Hold on. Cooked? Okay. Because I'd be like, if you're just having raw Brussels sprouts, that is a problem. Let's go with a couple more. Who's got a good one? Let's go right here. Yeah. All right, everyone. Sorry. Tell everyone your name loud and proud. Ruby. Let's give it up for Ruby, guys. Give it up for Ruby. Thank you, Gigi. All right. Ruby, what is the worst, ladies in the front, what's the worst vegetable of all time? Zucchini. Okay. Someone said that last night. So Ruby, why would you say zucchinis are the worst vegetable? Sure. That's a start. Yeah. Sure. Texture. Yeah. My wife, she hates cheese because of the texture. I still love her. But she hates mac and cheese. I know. We could keep talking. She also doesn't like bacon. I know. Talk to Bree later. You hate bacon? All right, one more. Who's got a good one? All right, right here in the white. Tell everyone your name loud and proud. Hold on. Thank you. Tell loud and proud. Esther, let's give it up for Esther, guys. Esther, what's the worst vegetable? Mushrooms. Oh, yes. Esther, do you agree or disagree? Mushrooms should be on pizza, yes or no? No is the right answer. All right. No is the. Hey, last night we were debating back and forth. I really like vegetables, except mushrooms, I guess. But I like, cauliflower and carrots, and we had one person last night that was not for carrots, and we were like, hey, go and put your hands down. But if you were to ask me, or I would ask you, like, hey, what's your least favorite type of fruit? I have a lot of answers. Number one, pineapple. Disgusting. It's bad, Caden. It's bad. Pineapple deserves to be thrown out. Hey, raise your hand if you think pineapple is good on pizza. Raise your hand. All right. Gabriella, all right. Now, put your hand down. Keep your hand up if you disagree with everyone that just raised their hand. Yeah, it's gross. It deserves to be thrown away, buried alive. I don't know. Hey, go ahead and put your hands down. That's good. That's good to know. Vegetables, good. Fruit, good. Whatever. It's good for you to have it. Hey, well, a couple things as we jump into this time of teaching. I want to invite you guys into something. So we're actually this weekend, we're going to be taking a break from our teaching series called Thriving in Middle School. We're going to take just this weekend off from that. Ladies in the front. And the reason is that I believe it is super important for us to understand a simple yet really important topic of what does it look like for us as middle school students, especially those that call themselves Christians, what does it look like for us to find comfort in the right places? I don't know about you, but I like comfortability. I like feeling comfortable. And I'm not just talking about like a snuggie or like an awesome blanket. I like to feel comfortable. And when things come up, such as anxiety, fear, worry, so many things, I think sometimes us as people, we run to or the bad things, thinking that it will bring us comfort. So we're going to take a moment this weekend and pause of what does it look like even when someone we really, really love, a family member, maybe a really good friend, when things don't go the way we thought they would or that they should, what does it look like when we lose someone or something in our life? Where do we find comfort in seasons of our life that are really, really dark? So, as we jump into this time, I want to invite you to grab that message note sheet. If you don't have one, it should be around you, in front of you. If you have one, raise it up in the air and just fan yourself a little bit. It's going to be a little bit warmer today. Hey, so there's fill-ins on the front and the back. It's not a test. It's not a quiz. We're not going to grade you in any way. This is a way for you to hopefully follow along so that when your parents ask you, hey, what did you learn? You can share what you learned rather than just staring into their soul. So this is a tool. Utilize it. There's going to be the fill-ins on the screen as we go throughout this time. So I want to remind us that some people in this room, we love this time. We love to come to Wildlife because we love playing games. We love worshiping. So many different things. Maybe you love this time of teaching as we go into God's word. But I totally understand if you're the kind of person that you're like, I do not like this time, whether it's boring, for whatever reason, right? I get it. But I'm going to ask anyone that maybe doesn't care for this time just to at least respect this time. And what that looks like, you're not talking to your neighbor, you're not being a distraction of the people around you. You are being present and being respectful of really Jesus, myself, and especially the people around you, because some people take this time seriously. So as we jump in, let's go ahead and we'll pray and then we'll get started. All right? Sound good? You guys with me? Good? Some of you were awake and now you're like, I'd rather go to sleep. Let's go and pray. Jesus, thank you so much for this time. I'm so grateful that every single person is here, every sixth, seventh, and eighth grader, and every staff as well. Jesus, you're with us, you're for us in this space. So we're just asking that you would help us find comfort in the right places. And it's in your name we all said, amen. Hey, well, Wildlife, I want to take you on this journey. About a month ago, in my one-on-one time with Jesus, my time with Jesus, that's just me and him. Sometimes it's reading the Bible. Sometimes it's through worshiping, through song. Sometimes it's just journaling and praying to God. So many different areas of how I spend one-on-one time with Jesus. And now, about a month ago, I started reading a book in the Bible in the Old Testament, the first half, called Ecclesiastes. Has anyone ever heard of this book or maybe read a couple of verses or something? And I'm still trying to figure out how to spell the word as I'm writing it down. I'm like, C, and then I have to go back to my Bible. How do you spell Ecclesiastes? But in this book, if you've never read it, it's a different type of book in the Bible than other books. This book sometimes is kind of like, in a sense, kind of depressing, because the guy that wrote it, Solomon, who is the wisest man of all time besides Jesus, he is an old man when he's writing this book, and he's kind of looking back at his life of some things that he really messed up on, and he's kind of processing how so many things in his life he chased after all the money in the world, all the power and possessions in the world, and he's basically saying, hey, like, everything is meaningless without Jesus. And I think for sometimes when we look around, we get caught up in the day-to-day things of having so many things, the newest iPhone, the newest gaming system, the newest shoe, the newest look, what one shoe, you get one shoe. Like, we get so caught up in the material things of this world. But what Solomon says in his wisdom, this is a wisdom book, it says, hey, those things, they can be great sometimes, but they're going to be here one day and then gone tomorrow. It's like just mist in the air. It's here a minute and then it's gone the next. And as you go into chapter 3 on your note sheet, there's some wisdom here. And what Solomon says is, hey, there is a time for everything. And he says this in chapter 3, verse 1 on your note sheet. He writes, there is a time for everything. There's a time and a place for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build. And then verse 4, a time to weep. If you have a pen with you, underline that word weep on your note sheet. Time to weep and a time to laugh. Underline that other word, laugh. And then he goes on to say a time to mourn and a time to dance. Underline that word mourn and dance. I don't know about you, but how do you typically respond when you're in a season of your life when life is going pretty bad? You would say that life's kind of not good right now. Or how do you even respond when life's going really great? He even says, like, hey, there's a time to laugh. Like, life's going good. You have friends in your life. Teachers are awesome for the most part. You're in good relationship with your parents. Like, everything's going great. You have a community of people and everything's just going awesome. He says, like, hey, there's a time to laugh. There's a time to dance and be joyous in those seasons. But what he says first is, hey, there's a time to weep. There's a time to mourn. Those words basically just mean like to sob, to cry, to mourn the loss of something or maybe even someone that matters a lot to you. So what I want to tackle this morning is, hey, how do we as Wildlife, how do we respond when life doesn't go the way we thought it would? I think sometimes when we lose something, whether it's something like very small in importance, but it's important to you. For example, like maybe you went to a concert or you went to a show and you got a t-shirt and you love this t-shirt because it reminds you of that one concert or the one time you went with your friends and your family, and then you just lose the t-shirt. And you're actually kind of sad about it because it reminded you of all the good times, all the great memories. Hey, ladies in the front. And you get kind of just sad. Uh, Solomon says, like, hey, it's okay to be sad, to mourn the loss of something. But what happens when you lose someone that is important to you? Like, I don't know if you remember a few years back with COVID, so many people lost loved ones, family members, grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, siblings. People lost people that were super important and people that would be really close to those people. How do we find comfort when we lose someone that's super important to us? Or maybe you're like, I can't relate to that. I haven't lost anyone that's super important to me. That's okay. That's awesome. But I'm sure you might have a friend that has. I'm sure that you have someone in your life that has lost a grandparent, a parent, a mom, or a dad that they don't really know how to respond. How do you respond to help those friends out? Ladies in the front, last time, serious. How do you respond and help bring comfort to those friends that have lost someone that's super important to them? I think sometimes we kind of put the blame on Jesus. I don't know about you, but I have done that in my life where I will go up to someone and be like, hey, what's going on? And they just share and share and share. And I kind of start to get upset, not at them, but like, man, why would that happen to this person? And I think sometimes we point and put the blame on Jesus and we go on this unending cycle of like, hey, Jesus, if you just did fill in the blank. Or Jesus, if you truly loved me, you would do fill in the blank. And I think sometimes we point fingers and we put blame on Jesus when sometimes the reality is that things happen and we don't always understand why. But what we do know is that Jesus is always good. And even when we don't understand it, Jesus does. And I share all of this because as we jump into God's word, we're going to actually look at a story in the New Testament. In John chapter 11, Jesus, one of his closest friends, Lazarus, actually gets very, very sick. Like sick. Not like a cold, like he's about to die. And Lazarus' sisters, Mary and Martha, find Jesus and say, Jesus, where were you? Because what we're going to see is Jesus did something that really doesn't make sense even to me. But again, know this: Jesus is good despite anything we go through. So I'm going to invite you to open up your Bibles. We're going to be in John chapter 11, and we're going to be starting at verse 1. Now, if you don't have a Bible with you, that's okay. The verses will be on the screen, but I want to encourage you to be bringing a Bible. If you don't have a Bible for whatever reason, or you just forgot it this morning, you can borrow one of ours. They're in the front. They're a student edition Bible, so hopefully it's a little easier for you to follow along. But we're going to be in John chapter 11, which comes after chapter 10. Right? Pretty cool. We're going to be starting at verse 1. Now, if you're brand new to your Bible, that is awesome. The Bible is split into two halves, the Old Testament and then the New Testament. We're going to be in the New Testament, the second half of our Bibles. If you have no idea where that book is, you're like, who's John? There's a table of contents in the first couple pages of every Bible to help you find certain books with a page number. So John chapter 11, we're going to be starting at verse 1. Now, as you're still turning there, I wanted to let you know something. This is a long story, and it reads just like a story. All right, stories are awesome. I love a good story. But for time and to save time, we're gonna jump around a little bit, and I'll try to fill in the blanks of like what we skip over and stuff. But I want to encourage you, find some time, maybe today or even tomorrow, where you're just reading this whole story because it's an awesome, epic story, and Jesus does a lot of crazy, awesome stuff. So let's start reading John chapter 11, starting at verse 1. The title of this is The Death of Lazarus. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary, and her sister Martha. Jump down to verse 3. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. So what we see here is Lazarus is sick, and Mary and Martha have heard of Jesus. Lazarus is good friends with Jesus, so they are like, all right, we need to find Jesus. Verse 4, when he heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. What? And then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. Now, I read that. Imagine you hear one of your friends is sick. They're in the hospital. Would you wait 2 more days to go and visit them? Probably not, right? And at this time, it's not like they can just get an Uber or take their Tesla or whatever, like down to see Lazarus. No, they had to walk everywhere, and that took some time. But what's interesting is Jesus purposely waits 2 more days. And what we'll see in a second is he does this to show how awesome God is. Let's continue reading, but jump down to verse 17. It says, on his arrival, so Jesus and his disciples eventually get to Lazarus and his sisters, and it says this, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. So Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. He's in a tomb. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to confront them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. That's important. We'll come back to that later. Lord, Martha said, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. So what does Martha do immediately? She blames Jesus. Have you ever blamed Jesus for something? Like she goes, Jesus, if you had been here in the time span that we let you know, like, hey, we gave you a heads up, Lazarus is sick, but you are late. If you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. But we see that Martha still has faith in who God is, who Jesus is. And she says again in verse 22, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. So maybe Martha's like, maybe there's some hope here. Maybe you're going to do some of your Jesus stuff. Like something might happen. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Like Jesus is inviting her to be like, hey, do you believe what I am telling you? And this is some big stuff. Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. Now we're going to pause quickly right there. What I want to help us understand is Mary, what did Mary do? She waited at home. She heard that Jesus is coming and she purposely waited at home. Maybe because she had doubt or she was like, no, I have to be here to take care of everything going on with the death of my brother. But Martha goes to Jesus, but she blames Jesus. Jesus, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. It continues, jump down to verse 32. Mary, very similarly, eventually she meets and confronts Jesus, and she says, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. The exact same response that her sister Martha said. Hey, if you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. Jesus, how could you do this to us? You loved Lazarus. Goes on to say in verse 33, this is what I really want you guys to kind of focus in on. Verse 33, it says, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved. Underline, put a box around that phrase. He was deeply moved. Goes on to say, in spirit and troubled, where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And then the shortest verse in the entire Bible, 2 words, verse 35, Jesus wept. I don't know about you, but what's your view of Jesus? When you think of Jesus, who are you picturing? Now, most likely, you might be thinking of the guy that plays Jesus on The Chosen, maybe. But chances are, if you were like me when I was in middle school, I thought Jesus was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white guy that maybe with like a British accent. And it's not because that's anything like I created. It's like if you ever look at like images of Jesus like during like the Renaissance era or like at your grandma's house, chances are you've probably seen an image of Jesus, and that's what he tends to look like. And he's always holding a lamb for whatever reason, and he looks very stoic. Kind of looks like Mona Lisa. He's not really smiling or anything, right? Chances are that's some of, not all, some of our view of who Jesus is in our minds. And I think sometimes we forget that Jesus was not that at all. He was a normal Jewish man, a rabbi that lived in the Middle East in the 1st century. He was nothing special about his appearance, is what the Bible teaches. And I think sometimes we forget that Jesus actually had emotion. He felt things that we feel. Jesus was 100% God and 100% man. That Jesus is God, but he was also man, human, when he was here on earth. And the reason that is that we can then be relating to Jesus, that all the pain, all the emotion you might feel in your life, Jesus has been there. So here's the thing I want you guys to catch. Here's the big thing. At the bottom of your note sheet, write this down. Jesus understands what we are going through, even when we do not understand. Jesus understands. Hey, Jesus understands exactly what you're going through, whether it's something awesome or something not so awesome. The loss of someone in your life, the loss of someone, of a friend of yours in their life. Jesus understands. He's not at a distance. Jesus is right there with us. He understands what's going on, even when we don't understand. Let's wrap up this passage. Verse 38, Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. This guy's smelly, probably, right? He's dead. His flesh is like decomposing. It's just a bad odor that no Axe body spray will ever fix. Goes on to say, then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, and I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had heard this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with stripes of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Now, picture that for a moment, that Jesus prays to God so that God would get the credit, that he would get the glory. And then he says, Lazarus, come out of that grave. And he probably starts to hop out because his hands are all tied because he was dead a minute ago. And he's right. He looks like a mummy probably. And he comes out, and everyone is probably in awe and shock. Why did Jesus do this? Why did he delay coming to visit Mary and Martha? He did this to show how awesome God is. You see, when life gets really, really difficult and we can't see the ending, we sometimes blame Jesus. Jesus, how could you do this? Why is this happening? Jesus understands exactly what you're feeling, but he has a much bigger picture of what's going on. Jesus knows exactly what is happening, and he's also there with you. Super important. So, as we wrap up this time, we're going to go fairly quickly. I want to ask you guys a question. Where do you tend to run for comfort? Where do you tend to run for comfort? I don't know about you. I love comfortability. And when something happens in my life, something terribly bad or really, really hard, a tragedy, for you, maybe it's someone that you loved passed away, or maybe it's a friend of yours, their parent passed away, or whatever, a friend. How do you bring comfort to someone, and how do they then find comfort? I think most of the time we run to certain things that we think bring us comfort, and sometimes they do, but it's temporary comfort. So with the rest of the time, on the back of your note sheet, we have a section called running to or running for comfort. Where do you go? We're going to go fairly quickly. So write down this first fill in. Number one, where do you run to? Number one, worldly pleasures. Worldly pleasures. Now, what I mean by this is the things of this world that bring pleasure, comfort, but are very temporary. Are very temporary. For example, these things are more of a distraction to kind of just get your mind off of that pain or emotion that you're feeling. You're like, I don't like that anxiety that I'm going through. I'm going to scroll on TikTok because the videos are funny and dogs are adorable. I'm going to just scroll on TikTok till the pain goes away, but then you put your phone down or your phone dies. And what happens? You tend to start thinking again about that pain or discomfort. Some things that I think us as wildlife, as middle school students, and even adults, I think we run to certain things such as drugs, alcohol, video games, food, pornography, phones, YouTube, social media, things that are simply just a distraction to kind of help us with the pain that we are feeling. But here's the thing, those are only temporary. They are a simple distraction from the deeper pain that you are feeling. So that's our first one. Number two, write this down. Community. Community. Community is a great thing, right? We love having friends. We love our life group. We love having people in our lives that we can rely on. Remember a few weeks ago in our Thriving in Middle School teaching series, we talked about friends, how to find the right friends. Friends are awesome. But if you are always, and I mean always, running to your friends for help and fully depending on them for everything, that can become a bad thing and a thing that you don't even recognize until it's like too late, where you are becoming dependent on people rather than someone an individual who is the only one that can bring comfort. Again, community is a great thing, but people will not fix your problems. Maybe temporarily, but they will not fix your problem. But hear me, community is great, life group is so important. But if you are always running to people instead to our third point, which is Jesus, you will always be feeling left out, and there's always going to be like a hole in your heart that's missing because Jesus is the only one that can bring us comfort, especially when we don't understand what's going on. Remember, the big thing is that Jesus understands even when you don't. Your friends might understand, like maybe your parent, your mom, your dad, or maybe a grandparent passed away recently, and you don't know how to process that. And maybe you go to a friend because their grandma passed away about 2 years ago, and you're like, maybe they can understand what I'm going through. Yes, but Jesus truly understands. He is our only comfort that will bring us true comfort. Again, community is good, is important, but Jesus is the only one that will do that. If you have a good community, they will point you to Jesus. Jesus said this in Matthew 11:28 on your note sheet. He says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Does Jesus say, hey, go to your friends? They have the answer. No, he didn't say that. Your friends might have a good answer, but if they're not pointing you to Jesus and challenging you, maybe they're not really as close of a friend as you thought. Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary, which means exhausted. Like you're done. You're on E. You're running on fumes. You are done. And then burdened, which means just a massive amount of weight on your shoulders. Like you just feel heavy. Jesus says, hey, if you come to me, I'll give you rest. That's awesome. I want rest. I want to feel comforted. Jesus says, you got to come to me. So as we wrap up this time, as the band comes up, we are going to go into one quick action step as we help us understand what does it mean to find comfort, especially when life gets hard, when you have a friend that maybe is not doing so well, that is sick, or maybe you have a friend that has a friend or knows someone that is sick or passed away, or you have a grandparent, whoever it is. What do? We get mad at God sometimes. We get upset with Jesus. Here's the action step. Write this down. Be brutally honest with Jesus. Be brutally honest with Jesus. Jesus can handle it. I think sometimes, not all the time, sometimes I think we go, I don't know if I can tell God this one thing. I just don't know if he can handle my pain. It's God. Jesus understands. So it's not like we're surprising him. Jesus completely understands. A way to be brutally honest with God is through prayer. And maybe you're writing down in your journal and your prayer is literally, God, how could you? God, I needed you there. How could you let this happen? Jesus sometimes lets things happen so that we would be fully dependent on Jesus, so that we can put our hope in him because he's the only one that can bring us comfort. King David, if you guys know King David, he's the one that killed Goliath, chopped off his head. Did you know that? That's in the Bible. So cool. He actually cries out to God and he actually writes this down. He is in deep, he's upset with God. He's actually very, very mad with God. He writes this in Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? Basically saying, why have you forgotten about me? Goes on to say, why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out to you day by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest. He's being brutally honest with God. But then in verse 3, he remembers who God is. He says, yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. So yes, David gets very upset with God, but he doesn't doubt who God is. He's just upset in the moment. I don't know about you, if you've ever been there where you get really, really, really upset and you start just to blame God. Going back to Mary and Martha, where were you? If you had been here, this wouldn't have happened. But Jesus does things when we don't fully understand it, and sometimes we're not supposed to understand it. And we're just to trust in who Jesus is, his character, knowing that he's good, he's for you, not against you. So I want you this week to be brutally honest with Jesus. I'm going to invite you guys to stand on up, and we're going to go into one last song of worship. And I want you to be brutally honest with Jesus right now. If you are upset about something, if you are frustrated about something, be brutally honest with Jesus. Let's go ahead and pray. Jesus, thank you so much for this time. We are grateful that you are always with us and you are always for us. And sometimes, Jesus, we don't always understand what goes on, but you do. So as we enter into this last song of worship, would you just remind us how good you are, that you understand us? And it's in your name we all said, amen.